Hey guys, this is a PowerPoint about the Romantic period, part two, because the other half of it you've already watched in a video, an Animoto video. So we're going to take some time and look this over, and you'll be taking notes on the attached sheet. So let's get started. Okay, so individualism and emotion, big things for our romantic folks. The direct forerunner of the romantics was Jean-Jacques Rousseau, the 18th century Enlightenment philosopher. He believed in the natural goodness of man and in the goal of individual fulfillment. He opened the way for the romantics' rejection of society's constraints and their belief in the importance of feeling. And it was only through emotion, according to him, that the individual could realize his or her human potential. So these folks are all about being an individual, showing their emotions, no matter how extreme. Honestly, the more extreme, the better for them. Okay. So for artists during this era, they wanted to express their emotions through their artwork. It became very important to them. They wanted their works to show intense emotions like passion, longing, fear, and heartbreak. Enlightenment thinkers, they condemned excess, but the romantics, they went to emotional extremes. They embraced it. They wanted to express that in everything they did. So because the projection of their feelings was so important, real artists were expected to have um, a personal style that was innovative and even eccentric. And something you may or may not notice that in this video, within this PowerPoint, you're going to see a variety of different romantic works. As with this one, you can see with the colors, they're creating that melancholy mood, strong emotions. You can see with the way the clouds in the sky look, it gives movement to the painting, and even gives kind of a spooky feel with the face or faces in the sky. And then you've got the individual on the hillside looking at this house with this creepy looking sky. This is actually based on the Edgar Allan Poe story, The Fall of the House of Usher, which would fall under a romantic era, and it's or under the romantic era, and its qualifications. So these folks, they wanted to break away from rules and convention. This search for individual freedom, it led to their revolt against conventions and strictures and authority, rationality, orderliness, all of that stuff. They wanted no part of it because the previous period they had focused on that. These folks were not into that. They embraced democracy and the rights and the dignity of the individual. Freedom of thought was essential to life, so they didn't conform to other people's way of doing things. They wanted to do their own thing. They wanted to be able to deal with subjects that their elders had considered in bad taste. They believed that they had absolute freedom to say whatever they want to say. They didn't want to be bound by any kind of rules that the previous period had handed down, the classicists. They didn't want to hear any of that mess. They wanted to do their own thing. Kind of like today, people want to be able to post whatever they want to post on social media, but then sometimes that doesn't always work out because there are rules and whatnot to it. These people, if they had social media accounts, they would have been blowing it up with all kinds of, personal ideas and emotions. And if you didn't like it, tough. They believed that the emotions an artist was trying to communicate were more important than formal rules. They had to break down artistic and personal barriers in order to achieve true art. Okay, so they loved nature. God and nature took on greater importance than reason and science. So totally walking away from that. These folks idealized nature. They delighted in its power and its unpredictability. They saw nature as an idealized world, and it could either be peaceful and tranquil or overwhelming power. So that'd be like your big storms and the craziness that goes with them. The artists painted serene landscapes, but they also did really wild scenery as well. So vast seascapes and brooding ruins, often with a mood of melancholy or terror. They tended to focus on that way of thinking, that deep, sad, or terror type emotion. The composers of the time wrote music that illustrated the moods of nature, both tempestuous and serene, and drew sound images of waterfalls, brooks, and landscapes. And if you listen to music from the period, you can definitely hear it. Beethoven spanned two different time periods with his music, both the classical age and the romantic period. And you can definitely hear the emotion in his works if you go back and listen to the pieces. The English poet Wordsworth wrote that it is possible to learn more about human nature and good and evil from nature than from books or the teaching of scholars. So that's a new look at things. The Romantics tended to look at the past for inspiration. They were nostalgic. Literature first and later music and painting as well showed a nostalgia for the mystery of the Middle Ages. Okay. And the weird thing about like this time period, different art forms, began the Romantic period at different times, as odd as that might sound. Just throwing that out there. So sometimes when you're doing research on that period, if you ever have to, you might get some conflicting dates, and that's why. That era was revered as a time when brave and honorable knights strove on behalf of beautiful damsels in distress, and the English speaking world avidly read Sir Walter Scott's historical novels. In France, Alexander Dumas' The Three Musketeers and the Count of Monte Cristo, and Victor Hugo's The Hunchback of Notre Dame were just as popular. So, The Three Musketeers, a lot of people know about that story, about, the one all for one and one for all idea. The Count of Monte Cristo, if you enjoy the Shawshank Redemption, it's actually a modern day version of that. Okay. In their search for emotional sensation, the Romantics did not ignore the dark side of human nature like their predecessors. They were fascinated with violence, fantasy, and nightmare. So everything supernatural was really important to them, was a driving force in some of their writings. So people like Mary Shelley, who wrote Frankenstein, and Edgar Allan Poe were extremely popular. Skip that. And then lastly, fairy tales and legends. So from Germany, the fairy tales written by the Brothers Grimm were spread far and wide. They are not your typical fairy tales, and they included a lot of violence and gore. Like with Cinderella, when her stepsisters tried on her shoes, if I remember correctly, one of them cut off their heel, and the other one, I think, cut off her toes to make them fit. So they had a very different look at stories that we're familiar with. The Legend of Faust, made into a dramatic poem by the great German author, and I'm not gonna lie, I can't pronounce this man's name. It's German. I've heard people say Goethe, but that does not look correct to me. So you might want to ask the German teacher here, Miss Davis, if you want to know for certain. But he told the story of a medieval scientist who sold his soul to the devil in order to have superhuman understanding, and is saved by his love for a lady named Gretchen. And there's more than one version of Faust. But it was the basis for many artistic works. There are many musical retellings of the story. So, you've got an opera, a symphony, and a variety of other things. Another author that wrote Faust would also be Christopher Marlowe. Okay, so that takes care of the second half of the Romantic period. So make sure that you have included all the things that you need to know on your notes, and that you turn in your notes for both parts of the Romantic period to get full credit. Okay?